to another episode of the Bulldog Blitz. It is officially May 1st, and it is a rare time in the year, in this calendar, where there is a sports equinox going on. And we'll start with the NFL draft to talk about Shedeur Sanders' historic fall and the Bears' implications on their future. But we'll start, obviously, with the most important storyline in this draft, which is Shedeur Sanders. Wait, hold on, I think I'm getting a call real quick. Yeah? I'm sorry, you're gonna have to wait a little longer on that. Just kidding. But no, seriously, Liam, what do you make of this whole situation? Because this is like a historic moment in the NFL that we've never seen anything like before.
Yeah, I mean, this man was a top 10 pick, even top 3 in a lot of people's drafts this year. There's a lot of teams that could have used a quarterback, and a lot of guys had Shedeur Sanders being the man. But I mean, this just goes to show that attitude is a huge aspect in, a job interview or any interview, especially for sports now, as he fell all the way to the 5th round, a historic drop for sure.
Yeah, and I would chalk this up to maybe Deion Sanders being maybe the world's worst manager, agent you could ever imagine, right? He completely had a chokehold over the media, had everyone forecasting him as a top 3 pick in the months before the draft. But then as it came up, Deion Sanders just advised him to make these horrible decisions, and Shedeur Sanders listened. He did not participate in the Senior Bowl, nor did he participate in the Combine, and his interview process was horrible. He only took about 7 interviews, and he had 4 teams interested in him, really. It was the Steelers, Giants, Browns, and the Saints. And maybe it's just a smokescreen the whole time, but from what the people were hearing, the Steelers were actually genuinely interested in him and taking him. But then something must have happened in those interviews. I also heard that with the Giants, something went catastrophically wrong as well. And people are saying that it was all because they were asking Shedeur to look at the playbook that they were giving him. He decided not to do that, and instead asking questions to the upper management about where they would accommodate him, how his role would be in the organization, and that rubbed the upper management and the front office the wrong way, and that's why he fell so hard in the draft.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of ironic. I don't know if you've seen the movie Draft Day, but this is almost the exact same thing that happened, especially including the Cleveland Browns, which was the team that was on the clock, expected to take the number 1 quarterback on the board, but he bombed that interview and then fell all the way to the 6th pick, had everyone confused. Clearly, Shedeur Sanders had the Steelers confused. I mean, if the Steelers really wanted him, they would have gone out and taken him. But when it got to their pick, they saw everyone else passing up on him, and it's kind of a no-brainer. If no one else wants him, why should you want him? The Steelers passed up on him.
And we'll talk about this later, but the Steelers could be cooked for next season because it seems like they're just playing the waiting game on Aaron Rodgers right now. They still don't have a quarterback. They have great weapons with both DK Metcalf and George Pickens, an insane duo there. But really, the future's not looking bright for Pittsburgh in these next upcoming years or so with no long-term situation in place. But more on Shedeur, he just came off as a self-aggrandizing, narcissistic prima donna in his interviews. And Deion Sanders kept advising him to make the wrong decisions. On a podcast in 2024, he kept alluding to how if he was selected in the city he wouldn't like, they would pull an Eli Manning and maybe force their hand to move him to a different city. And also, when speaking with an NFL QB coach, Shedeur got offended when a QB coach spoke ill of him and asked him to remove that post from what his posted on social media. And that once again was just a complete taboo, a complete no-no in the industry. And just all these situations spiraled into this massive ball that just did not help Shedeur in any case.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bad situation to be in when Shiloh Sanders, the son of Deion Sanders, fires his dad from being his manager during the NFL draft. That just goes to show that Deion clearly wasn't getting his job done. And I mean, obviously, there's a lot that falls on Shedeur, but it also falls on his manager. Everyone's manager tells them what they need to know. They'll be interrogated during these interviews. If you don't follow the interviews, no team's going to want you. And Shedeur did the exact opposite of that and, wanted to be a prima donna, wanted teams to be like, oh, we want this guy, he's confident. No one wants that kind of confidence that will draw you away from the game.
It was clear that both Deion and Shedeur just had large misconceptions about where they believed he ranked as a prospect and where the rest of the NFL thought he ranked and where he should go in the draft. And that led to him being choosy with the interviews he decided to take. He was very deliberate with his decisions. Chose to forego the Combine and the senior draft, like I said, and that ultimately did not help his case because the scouts were looking to analyze him at these places, they thought that he did not have enough tape that was backing up all that was being said about him, and he fell because people did not like him and his character. It was really not just a decision based on his footballing ability, because realistically, I mean, I feel bad for the guy because he probably deserved to be taken in the second round, third at the latest. Instead, he fell all the way to the fifth because of the character concerns. You're not just taking Shedeur Sanders, but you're also taking the name and likeness image of the Sanders family name with Deion and Shiloh and all that family baggage that accompanies that.
Yeah, of course. I mean, Shedeur, obviously no one deserves that, falling to the third day in the draft. No one wants to see a player do that. I mean, but some would say it's perfect timing when you fall to the fifth round, 144th overall pick. But I mean, it's bad on his image, and it's even worse on Deion's image, in my opinion, when he takes over a team and gets the cockiness of not only Shedeur Sanders, but Travis Hunter. And Travis Hunter makes the smart move, doesn't have Deion as his manager, and everything's going uphill for Travis Hunter, and everything is on a downhill for Shedeur.
Yeah, and speaking of things that you don't deserve, he actually received a prank call that caused a lot of controversy around the league. It was by Jeff Ulbricht's son, who is the offensive coordinator for the Atlanta Falcons, Jax Ulbricht, who stole some classified information off of a document left out by Mr. Ulbricht and prank called Shedeur with his friends, and resulted in a pretty hefty fine, $350,000. Has the league gone too soft with this? I mean, it's just a prank call, right?
Yeah, I do agree with you, but it's also a prank call about the rest of somebody's life. Shedeur, in his mind, I believe this was this day 2 of the draft, or was
it was day 2, yes.
Yeah, and the difference between being a second round draft pick in day 2 and a fifth round draft pick in day 3, that's millions of dollars that is missed out on by Shedeur and what he thought he was going to take from, I believe the call was from the New Orleans Saints.
Yeah, Mickey Loomis, the general manager.
Yeah, but I think a fine is definitely worth it, but $350,000, that's a hefty fine. Especially just $250,000 was just on Jeff Ulbricht himself.
It's a lot of money, and I think the NFL was making an example of this, and that's why they decided to go with such a heavy punishment, because not only was it just a prank call, but it was also like a breach of security almost.
Yeah.
It was dismantling the integrity of the NFL and its practices by going against the system and getting these prank phone calls to this established security system that they had with the players.
Yeah, but I do think this could bring up even better draft experiences. A lot of when you scroll through Twitter about these situations, because this didn't only just happen to Shedeur, it happened to many players of the draft. More stories are coming out every single day, and a lot of them are also leading back to the Atlanta area code, which just even makes Jeff Ulbricht look even worse. But this could also lead to no phone calls happening before a player is drafted, so you can really get a raw reaction during a draft, which is something I think I would love to see.
That actually is a great point. Imagine you're watching it with your family and you see your name come across that screen. There's probably no other moment just like that.
Exactly. It's not like picking up the phone and then waiting. It's you get that and then you get a phone call. I think that would be 10 times better, and something the NFL should definitely look into changing up.
And Shedeur was not the only victim. Abdul Carter, Jackson Dart, and Tyler Warren, for all we know, there could be more, were like the victims of this malicious and just senseless attack. Just absolutely. But so now that the Cleveland Browns have picked Shedeur Sanders, he was the fifth round pick, 144th overall. He is in maybe one of the most bizarre QB rooms we've ever seen. 5 100%. QBs: Joe Flacco, Deshaun Watson, Kenny Pickett, and then also Dylan Gabriel, along with Shedeur Sanders.
Yeah. And surprisingly, I don't think anybody in any draft class had this happening. Dylan Gabriel went 2 rounds before Shedeur was picked to the Cleveland Browns, which I don't think anyone had Dylan Gabriel on the Cleveland Brown boards or really any team to have a quarterback room like this. Very strange pick in my opinion, but when you can't take your man, I guess you take a backup, which was Dylan Gabriel.
They may have just picked Dylan Gabriel for the simple fact of humbling Shedeur Sanders.
Yeah.
Because when I saw that phone call, I didn't see the phone call with Dylan Gabriel, but I saw it with Sanders and the GM. He did not seem happy to be calling Shedeur Sanders at all. He was saying, "Oh, you're gonna have to earn this spot. Hopefully you make an example out of the people that passed on you." But he was not happy in the remotest sense, and it seemed that this is going to be more of just a project with Shedeur.
Yeah, 100%. And when you look at NFL rules, I believe you get 2 quarterbacks rostered and an emergency backup quarterback in case the starter gets hurt and then the backup gets hurt. So that means there's 5 quarterbacks on this list here. 2 of these guys won't even be on the roster when the season comes. They'll either be practice squad players, or maybe, you know, if Shedeur is one of the 2 that gets cut, then maybe he gets picked up from somebody else, and that obviously no one else has interest in him to pick him up because of attitude problems. 2 of these guys won't have a team this year, and Shedeur Sanders is the one that sits all the way at the bottom of this list. He has a lot to pick up.
Yeah, ESPN currently has him last on the depth chart. They only have slots for 4 quarterbacks, so he's actually not even listed on there.
Yeah.
But let's be the first ones to call it. Who do we think is going to start week 1?
Week 1 starting, I don't see Deshaun Watson. I see the Cleveland Browns doing anything they can to either buy out his contract or see if anybody else wants to take a shot on him, which I don't think anyone will. And I could honestly see a Kenny Pickett week 1 starter.
I was going to agree with you. Joe Flacco is currently the betting favorite, but I see him more as like a mid-season switch for like a week or 2 to maybe galvanize the team and lead them on like a win or 2 when they really desperately need it. But I think Kenny Pickett, just because of his athleticism and age, will probably get to start week 1. Deshaun Watson, I think he's going to be one of the 2 people that are cut.
Yeah.
I think it'll be Deshaun Watson and probably Dylan Gabriel.
Yeah.
I think they're going to keep Shedeur Sanders on just for the publicity. Could cause some problems though when he's throwing some darts in preseason and the fans start getting anxious and are calling for him to start.
Yeah.
And then he's not even dressing because he'll be the 3rd string. So we'll see there. But yeah, I'm going to say Kenny Pickett at starter, Joe Flacco at backup, and Shedeur Sanders as the emergency 3rd quarterback.
Yeah, I like that because I think the signing was great of Joe Flacco because I think everyone here thinks that Deshaun Watson won't be on this roster when the season comes, so he will be either getting cut or his contract will be bought out, whichever one is cheaper for the Browns to do. And Joe Flacco could be a mentor for Kenny Pickett, Dylan Gabriel, or Shedeur Sanders. Obviously, a little less for Dylan Gabriel because Gabriel is a left-hand thrower, so he's got a little flipped field than Joe Flacco does. But we have seen before with the Cleveland Browns what Joe Flacco can do in the clutch, leading them to a playoff run that didn't go far, but brought them to the playoffs in an unsuspecting manner.
Yeah, I think the organization's like forever indebted to him for that, and that's why they decided to bring him back for another year. Over or under 1.5 starts for the rest of Deshaun Watson's career, what do you think?
I'll take the over. I could see him being signed by a team for pretty cheap, a quarterback getting hurt, or maybe a week 18 game that, you know, a team has already clinched the playoffs, so why not see what Deshaun can do against a real team? Obviously, with a couple of less starters, but I think he'll get another shot somewhere, but I don't think he'll be making nearly as much money as he did.
Yeah, no, it'd be funny if he went to the Eagles because we always know the Eagles are great taking guys with character issues and somehow revitalizing them, and so maybe he'll end up in a good situation there, but who knows? I'm gonna smash the under currently, but we'll see how that goes. And so now let's get to the Bears because they had a pretty impactful draft class this year, pretty mixed bag, mixed reviews across the board. I'd say overall I'd give it a B grade because they addressed some of their needs in like the middle rounds, but like in the opening rounds they got a lot of good weapons, a lot of talent, but still like it depends how you slice it. I'm not totally convinced, but I'm gonna trust Ben Johnson, so I'm gonna give it a B for right now. But let's go through it pick by pick.
Well, yeah. So I agree with your B rating, but you know I just think the Bears really had an awkward spot to be in, right? Everyone had the Bears going Genty or the Bears going a lineman early on, but then when Genty fell off the board, we were kind of in a stuck position. Who do we draft? And obviously that led us to take Colston Loveland instead of Tyler Warren, which had many fans shocked, but it's grown on me. I like the pick. And because of this awkward spot, we had to trade back 3 different times. Our first trade occurred on day 2, where we received the 56th pick and the 62nd pick and the 109th pick from the Bills, and then we gave them our 41st pick, our 72nd pick, and our 240th pick in the 7th round, which I think was pretty smart because the 2 people that were drafted before what happened to be Luther Burden, I don't think we were taking them no matter what.
Yeah, and I'm pretty happy with the decision to not ultimately trade up for Genty. I think if Genty fell to us, that was probably going to be the pick that Poles was going to go for. But the fact that he didn't, I think that they were willing to sit back and go for Loveland, who I'm sure they were actually probably considering as their second next guy the whole time.
Yeah, 100%. In reports before the draft that I saw after the draft, it was Bears apparently have Colston Loveland above Tyler Warren, which if had I seen that before, I would have been quite confused. When Loveland's name was called, I didn't even know what college he went to, which is kind of a shame on me. He's a pretty good player, but I think he was the right pick.
Yeah, I mean, overall, a lot of trades made with the Bills and trading to get more draft capital. Overall, I'd just say that the Bulls did not pull a Larsa Pippen here. He did not screw our future. But he's investing in the later drafts that are coming up. He's investing in our future, which I'm a fan of. We'll see how it all plays out because we didn't really get any big names besides that. Besides, I'd say Luther Burden.
Yeah.
And maybe
yeah,
Colson
100%.
Loveland could pan out to be a great guy. But yeah, going more specific into Colson Loveland, it was definitely a Ben Johnson pick, right? I think polls
No doubt.
let Ben Johnson take the steering wheel there because he will fit perfectly into the 12 personnel offense that I'm sure Ben Johnson will want to play. Little stat from last year, actually. The Lions were in the third highest amount of 12 personnel in the league last year, and that was with Brock Wright as their second tight end out in the field. Only had 13 receptions all year. Imagine what the Bears can do with two guys with the pedigree of Cole Kmet and Colson Loveland. I think it'll be way better, and the Bears are just going to live in this two tight end setup the whole year.
Yeah, and something that I would love to see out of Colson Loveland is a little Darren Waller kind of playbook. Darren Waller was never the bigger blocker of the tight ends. He was just a receiver that could play tight end, and Colson Loveland fits that exactly how Darren Waller did. Obviously, Darren Waller fell off once going to the Giants, but when he was in that Raiders system where he was able to go downfield and be an option, he was a lethal threat, and I think we could see a lot of that out of Colson Loveland. Obviously, it's not common to see a Brock Bowers kind of year where the tight end is the best player in the draft class, or a best receiver in the draft class that just happened. But I think Colson Loveland could have a solid year in what should be very exciting Ben Johnson offensive scheme.
He was the best route running tight end, period, in the entire draft class, for sure. And he's also going to be a great complement to Cole Kmet in the receiving game, where I feel like Tyler Warren may not have been it so much. I'm seeing comps more to Travis Kelce, where Tyler Warren was more of like a Gronkowski type.
Yeah.
So if we're talking about receiving, Ben Johnson's going to love that pick. And it is scaring some Bears fans, though, because he did have shoulder surgery and a pretty bad injury there during last year and the season before that as well. And fans are kind of drawing comparisons to a guy known as Kevin White, wide receiver pick taken years back that did not turn out to go well at all for the Bears. So fans are a little skeptical there, but I'm going to say hold tight. I think Ben Johnson knows what he's doing. And it just reminds me of the whole Darnell Wright versus Jalen Carter debate, because people wanted one guy and then they took the other, to a lot of people's dismay. But then also you could compare him to Carter in a way because of the injury concerns that came and how there were concerns with character for Carter and there were concerns for Loveland, or for injury with Loveland. But both most definitely had the higher upside than the alternative pick.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, that's a very similar situation to what the Bears were in. But like I said before, I do love the pick, and a pick I love even more would be the Luther Burden III pick from Missouri at pick 39. A lot of people were confused on why he fell, but his production did fall a little bit in college football play. He's touted as one of the best receiver talents in the months and the week leading up to the draft, and only second best behind Tet McMillan, who was a top 10 draft pick this year, a phenomenal star. But I really love the Luther Burden pick.
Yeah, he was definitely the best man available on the board after Travion Henderson was taken, literally the pick right before the Bears. Once again, I feel like the Bears were definitely opting to take him in that pick, and then it just did not work out the way they wanted. Apparently, they were actually trying to trade up for him with the team above the Patriots. It just did not work out. I think that would have been the Dolphins.
Yeah.
The Dolphins ended up taking a guard that they needed. But yeah, back on Burden, I'm really excited for him. He's got that chip on his shoulder. He posted on his Instagram story the night after getting passed on the first round. He was on a late night practice in the Missouri practice field, showing that he's all about it. And like you said, his production dipped his junior year, whereas sophomore year he was a Biletnikoff Award semifinalist. But you can all attribute that to his quarterback room being injured, with Brady Cook being out for a lot of the season. It was bad play calling that led him to have kind of a really small route tree almost.
Yeah.
So teams were asking for more tapes on him running routes in practice because he just was not getting a lot of looks or a lot of variety of looks during the Missouri games. And also just a revamped receiver room. They had a new guy coming in, Tease, who was like their now ex-wide receiver for some reason. But overall, Burden's numbers in terms of production were still really good. He cut his drop rate in half in 2024 compared to 2023, and his success rate on targets also increased. So he's still the same wide receiver that he was from 2023, if not even better.
Yeah, I think Luther Burden kind of reminds me of that big gap year that Deontay Johnson took after the infamous year where he couldn't catch football. And, you know, Deontay Johnson didn't have an outstanding all-pro year, but he had a year where he fixed the problems he needed to fix, which is exactly what Luther Burden did. Although he basically cut his yard total in half, he only lost about 15 receptions, or actually lost a decent amount of 25 receptions. He still had 6 touchdowns compared to his sophomore year where he had 9 touchdowns. I think Luther Burden really took this year and, you know, accepted that the Mizzou offense wasn't around him, which obviously sadly or happily for Bears fans, you know, lowered his draft stock. But he fixed things that he needed to fix, like catch rate, which is a huge problem you see in rookie receivers in the NFL.
And he's great after the catch too. He's like a Deebo Samuel type player, which I'm very excited about. I love hearing that comp because I was jealous when the Commanders got Deebo Samuel during the offseason. So the fact that people are comparing him to like live up to that mold, that's pretty exciting. And also, he's pretty similar to DJ Moore in that they have a pretty similar skill set. Both are great after the catch, and he's also going to be developed under wide receiver coach Antoine Randall L., who's the same guy that developed Amon-Ra St. Brown. So he's just going to be under a great set of mentors and tutors to him to help him thrive. And he's also got a 4.41 40 speed, which also helps.
Yeah.
He looks like a guy that wasn't that athletic when I first saw him, to be honest. Looks kind of like Lucky, the rapper. I was hoping for more like a Garrett Wilson, Justin Jefferson, tall and lanky, twitchy type guy. He didn't look like that, but he apparently still is pretty fast.
Yeah, and now when you take a look at the Chicago Bears depth chart in the receiver room, we are pretty much stacked at whatever you need. We have DJ Moore in the 1 spot for wide receiver, followed by Rome Odunze, who had a very solid rookie year, obviously hoping to have a sophomore boost, and then Luther Burden, a man in the wide receiver 3 spot, just like Rome Odunze was last year, and Odunze showed that he could still produce. And now that we have Odunze stepping up and Luther Burden stepping in, I think our receiving core for the next couple of years, especially because we have 2 guys on a rookie contract and DJ Moore settled in for a 4-year deal, I think our receiver room does not need to be worked on for the next couple of seasons, especially now that we have depth with Olamide Zaccheaus, who was a Atlanta Falcon and then a Washington Commander this past season, who was a guy that could really step up in any game that they needed him to. I think our receiver room and maybe offense in total looks great, and that's a big shout out to Ben Johnson.
Yeah, Zaccheaus would be a great deep threat, and Ben Johnson's just continuing adding another infinity stone to his gauntlet of just offensive weapons that he can use for this season. So it should be cinema on the football field. Now let's go to a more needed pick, Ozzie Trapilo at pick 56 in round 2, an OT from Boston College. And this guy was a guy that the Bears traded down for. They didn't see much value on the board at pick 41 in the 2nd round, so they traded down. The only guy that was really there in his position was Ariante Ursary. So I'm pretty mad if he turns out to be like a perennial all-pro type of guy that he's on the Texans right now. But from what I'm hearing about Trapilo, he's a very safe pick, very high floor, incredible athletic measurables where he's like 6'8", one of the tallest players in the draft, 315 pounds. And he was actually formerly recruited at Northwestern. People are saying, yeah, this guy will never be like a superstar offensive tackle, but he'll definitely be a quality guy that could last like 10 years in the NFL.
Yeah, and that's just what you need to see in a offensive line that was pretty near the bottom of the league just a couple of years ago, and including last year. We had a terrible O-line, and now we signed a couple of great guys with the additions of Joe Thuney and Drew Dahlman. That just goes to show that, we've spent our money on the O-line. We need Mr. Reliable, in which we are hoping to have just drafted out of Ozzie Trapilo.
What's also great is that he's a pretty versatile tackle. He can play either left or right. He played both in college. Some people have him playing right tackle like ESPN behind Darnell Wright, or even competing for that spot. But I think the consensus opinion overall, what I believe, is that he'll replace Braxton Jones by the the end of the season, or maybe even at the start of the season, because Braxton Jones is a pretty injury-prone tackle at left tackle. So you can really line him up anywhere, and that's what's pretty good about his situation.
Yeah, and a guy that can be lined up at both right and left tackle, you'd assume, maybe he gives up a couple bad sacks because he's not used to either side, but that's just not true. He only allowed 2 sacks in 2 years, had an 80.5 pass blocking grade in PFF, a really high floor in my opinion, but a pretty low ceiling. Not a guy that we would assume to see an all-pro player. But I think it's good that the Bears got a big man, a scary guy, instead of a nice man that, a Jason Kelce kind of player.
And another guy that they got, a guy that I probably even like even more than Ozzie Trapilo, is Shamar Turner, who they took with pick 62, defensive tackle from Texas A&M. This guy's also versatile. He could play defensive tackle behind Grady Jarrett or Gervon Dexter, or he could play out on the pass rush on the edge behind the new guy, Dayo Odeyingbo from the Colts. So I really like this guy. High upside, high ceiling pick because he's drawing draft comps to Matabuke on the Ravens, who was an all-pro. So his output dipped in 2024, kind of like Luther Burden, but that goes for all of the Texas A&M D-line, including Shamar Stewart, who was taken in the first round. So I'm excited for him.
Yeah, this guy is really good against the run, and he's low center of gravity. He's got good hands. I think this is a great pick. There is a little bit of injury and character concerns on both the positive and the negatives, but I think that this is a really good draft pick, a man that we needed, and like you said, we did draft Odeyingbo, I don't know how to say that, but from the Colts, who had a decent year last year. I think drafting a linebacker was great, to compete with Odeyingbo. I think this is a great pick and a good battle to see who's going to take this starting spot.
And you mentioned character concerns. This is actually my favorite part about Shamar Turner because he got ejected in 2023 playing Ole Miss after uppercutting a guy in the nuts by the name of Micah Pettis. First of all, Hail State. Ole Miss can go kick rocks. I'm not all about that hotty-toddy stuff. And second of all, Micah Pettis had it coming. He basically teabagged the guy. And when one man puts a sack on top of another man's head, all bets are off, in my opinion. So this is exactly what the Bears need, right? We don't need the soft teddy bear guy like Kieran Amagachi, who played horrible last year. That's kind of why I'm fearful about Ozzie Trapilo. He just seems too nice, too soft. Yeah. This is a guy who needs to be rough around the edges, restore that Monsters of the Midway legacy that was once famed throughout the league. And I'm excited. This is we're back with the Bad News Bears. This is a good pick. Yeah. And it's character concerns. Once again, I'm itching for a guy like Jalen Carter since we passed on him. And it seems like this guy can scratch that itch or even punch that itch.
Yeah, exactly. I was just about to say that Jalen Carter, we were just talking about it with Darnell Wright, we're talking about the character concerns and why people passed up on Jalen Carter, but clearly, it didn't go to do anything. Jalen Carter was a feisty player. Obviously, had some off the field antics that he needed to control, and got to Philly, controlled them all, and is a Pro Bowl player. He is an all-star for the Philadelphia Eagles, and this is exactly what I like out of our draft pick.
And just overall, from what I'm hearing about the draft, it seems that anyone with character concerns who's taken in a later round is always deemed as a steal of the draft. This goes the same way for Mike Green, who was taken by the Ravens. People are like, oh my gosh, he's a steal because he had some pretty bad sexual assault allegations. Yeah. And now he went later in the draft because of that. And people are like, oh my gosh, but he's actually a great talent. And the Ravens can whip him up into shape, and that's why he's a steal of the draft. So I like guys with character concerns. They always turn out to be good if they're in a good situation. And I think because there's veterans in the locker room now with Grady Jarrett, he can do well. And like Ryan Poles said, he can play with an educated edge and not just reckless abandonment where he's picking up personal fouls left and right.
Yeah, I agree with your statement. You always need that feisty guy on a defense, and that's a great pick to take, in my opinion. And let's go to our next pick in round 4, pick 132, Ruben Hippolyte from Maryland. He's another linebacker. A lot of people are seeing this as a huge reach, as he was projected to be an undrafted free agent from many reporters. And we have written down this may have been a little bit of a hear me out kind of pick from Ryan Poles, but like I stated earlier, I think the Bears were just in such an awkward spot in every single round that we needed a bunch of hear me out picks. This kind of reminds me of, you're playing Madden, you see a hidden development trait, and he's an undrafted free agent, so you take him. I think that's what Poles sees out of Hippolyte, a guy that shows lots of upside, but just isn't on many players' boards.
Poles has a habit of taking really athletic guys in the later rounds, like taking a chance on them, and that's exactly the same for Ruben Hippolyte. He is the fastest linebacker in the draft. He ran a 4.42 40 speed, which is insane for a defensive edge rusher player like him. I think he'll probably end up being like a special teams demon, even if he makes the cut after preseason, where he'll just line up down there in special teams. What could also be funny, though, is that Bears were in dire need of a running back. Hey, he's showing comparisons to Saquon Barkley in the relative athletic score metric, whereas he was pretty bad for a linebacker. So maybe they stick him there, which would be funny.
Yeah, that'd be pretty cool, and maybe he could be our fullback instead of throwing one of our linemen at the goal line.
Like Doug Kramer, yeah.
Yeah,
because that worked out really well.
No, it did work out great in that offensive scheme that was flawless that whole season. But luckily we did get Ben Johnson, so maybe this could have been a little bit of a Ben Johnson chip-in pick here. But let's go to our next pick. It was in round 5, pick 169. Za Frazier. He's a cornerback from UTSA. A+ overall for the Bears if we're drafting based off of name aura alone. I want my cornerback named Za Frazier. I don't know about you. Reek Woolen reminds me of almost. Yeah. But like Ruben Hippolyte as a linebacker, come on. Luke Newman is like your prototypical cookie cutter lineman that's going to play in the NFL for like a decade. And you got Luther Burden. Are you kidding me? I want a wide receiver named Luther Burden. That's and the third at the end.
Yeah, so it's complete aura from the Bears. And Za Frazier, apparently an athletic freak, ran a 4.36 40, 6'3", 6'8" wingspan. Only problem with him is that there are competition issues because the good games that he played in were all in his American Athletic Conference, which is pretty Mickey Mouse. He did unfortunately allow Quinn Ewers and Archie Manning to torch him for 427 pass yards and 56 points when they finally played a good opponent in Texas in the regular season. I don't know if we mentioned, but Za Frazier came from UTSA. So some ups and downs with him, but I'm excited because there's a lot of potential there.
Yeah, I agree. A lot of potential, but when it comes to potential, there's a little bit of a downside when he is a 25-year-old rookie, older than probably now half the players on the Bears because we do have a pretty young squad. But like you said, it'll go to show once the season and preseason starts how he's going to perform against higher competition teams, and maybe we'll even get a look at that during training camp sessions through reporters. But I do like the pick. He's got a 6'8" inches wingspan and a 4.36 40 time. This guy is an athletic specimen, a guy that a good prospect for year to come.
And speaking of, moving on to their round 6 pick, Luke Newman, this guy had a 9.69 out of 10 relative athletic score, which was the 55th highest among all guards since 1987. So once again, just a freak athletically. And he kind of has the opposite problem of Frazier, where he actually is good when it comes to competition. He played against Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham at Michigan State against Michigan, and he did pretty well. He allowed Aiden Childs, their quarterback, to go for 129 yards, 17 for 23, 1 touchdown, 0 interceptions. Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant had both 0 sacks on the day. So not bad overall, and I think he'll be ready for some stiffer competition when it comes to league play.
Yeah, I agree. And now we'll move on to our last draft pick in the 7th round, pick 233, Kyle Monaghan, who cares, from Rutgers. I actually really like this pick. We talked about, and I've said it 2 or 3 times now, just the awkward position the Bears were in. They were kind of, sniped out of the running back market. But this guy is a bulldozer, a thunder more than lightning kind of player. And this is the exact kind of guy we want to match up with DeAndre Swift if we're trying to do a Lions offense with like David Montgomery and why can't I think of his name?
Travis Homer. Definitely not Travis Homer.
Definitely not.
Jameer Gibbs, right?
I don't know how I blank on Jameer Gibbs' name. What a guy. But I do like this pick. I mean, obviously a 7th round pick, you don't really expect much from that pick. But I saw drafts where Kyle was going pretty higher in, not high in the draft, but I mean 4th, 5th rounds. I think it's a great pick for a 7th round pick.
Yeah, they settled here that they definitely did not reach on an earlier running back pick. They definitely also wanted Cam Scatabo, I think in the 4th round where he went, but the Giants took him 4 picks before, and they decided to trade out of that with the Bills once again. But yeah, with Kyle Monaghan, even better than his running abilities, he's also a great blocker. I think he can blow up edge rushers at the line. Very physical guy that will never die on a play, committed, and I really like him. I think he'll be great for the locker room, provides a lot of good energy, just a really good motor and engine there in the backfield.
Yeah, I agree. And now let's talk about what our Bears backfield could possibly look like after, not trading up for Gentry and not making the move towards Scadaboo. There is still a couple of names in free agency that I would like to talk about. There's Nick Chubb, J.K. Dobbins, Jamal Williams, and Gus Edwards. Those are probably the top four names in free agency, and as of recent, there's been lots and lots of talks of Nick Chubb coming to the Bears, which I actually really love, because Nick Chubb, coming off of an offseason, off of a pretty bad injury that everyone has ever watched football knows how bad that looked on camera. I think we could sign Nick Chubb for a lower amount than what he's actually valued for, and get a good season out of him.
I'm a little skeptical, to be honest, because I am very worried about his age and his deterioration physically. If you ask any NFL casual last season, oh yeah, did he even play last year? They'd say no, because they forgot that he even came back towards the latter end of last season because of his such low output that he had. Jerome Ford really took over that backfield. So I'd personally be vying more for a guy like J.K. Dobbins, but that would come with a heftier price tag.
Yeah.
So who knows? Maybe they'll stick with DeAndre Swift overall and just go with him and Monangai. And who's the other guy in the Bears backfield? Roschon Johnson at the goal line.
Oh yeah, Roschon. That's a big body there too.
So who knows?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I do have against J.K. Dobbins, I had him on my fantasy team. Great guy, always produced. But I just think he was he's a little bit of too injury prone. Last year was almost his first full season played, but he did get injured towards the end of the year, throwing him on the IR for a couple of weeks. Came back and looked as good as new. But, I am a fan of the Nick Chubb, signing.
And so now that will conclude our coverage of this episode's Bulldog Blitz. Thanks for sticking there with us. This may have been our penultimate or last episode because we will be graduating soon. As you can see, we have our College Decision Day shirts on with us. I'm committed to the University of Miami, and Forks up, Liam.
Yeah, going to Arizona State with Cam Scadaboo, sadly the Giant, but
So we may be passing the torch to Henry Juergens and Colin Semino, who will be doing their own thing with Sideline Insight. Or we may keep trying to do it through college over YouTube. We'll try to see if we can take it into a different form. But it's been a pleasure so far doing Bulldog Blitz, and we're very excited for what the future holds. And so from here in the studio, so long from the Bulldog Blitz for right now.
Mr. Holden loves you.
And Mr. Holden loves us. So.
Yeah, thank you for our mentor, Mr. Holden.
Couldn't do it without that man.
Yeah.